Our lives are filled with distractions. Email, Twitter, texting. We're constantly connected to technology, rarely alone with just our thoughts. Which is probably why there's a growing movement in America to train people to get around the stresses of daily life. It's a practice called mindfulness, and it basically means being aware of your thoughts, physical sensations, and surroundings. Tonight, we'll introduce you to the man who's largely responsible for mindfulness gaining traction. His name is Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he thinks mindfulness is the answer for people who are so overwhelmed by life, they feel they aren't really living at all.
There are a lot of different ways to talk about mindfulness, but what it really means is awareness.
Is it being present?
It is being present. That's exactly what it is.
I don't feel I'm very present in each moment. I feel like every moment I'm either thinking about something that's coming down the road or something that's been in the past.
So ultimately, all this preparing is for what? For the next moment, like the last moment, and then we're dead. So in a certain way, are we going to experience while we're still alive? We're only alive now.
Jon Kabat-Zinn is an MIT-trained scientist who's been practicing mindfulness for 47 years. Back in 1979, he started teaching mindfulness through meditation to people suffering from chronic pain and illness. That program is now used in more than 700 hospitals worldwide.
So how can you be mindful in your daily life?
When your alarm goes off and you jump out of bed, what is the nature of the mind in that moment? Are you already like, oh my God, your calendar pops into your mind and you're driven already? Or can you take a moment and just lie in bed and just feel your body breathing and remember, oh yeah, brand new day and I'm still alive. So I get out of bed with awareness, brush my teeth with awareness. When you're in the shower, next time check and see if you're in the shower.
What do you mean check and see if you're in the shower?
Well, you may not be. You may be in your first meeting at work. You may have 50 people in the shower with you.
Kabat-Zinn says mindfulness takes practice. A lot of people start with a training class to learn how to meditate. He agreed to teach us at a weekend retreat on a remote mountaintop in Northern California. When we arrived, we were told there'd be no television to watch, no internet, not even an alarm clock.
So I'm checking in.
The retreat was full of professionals, neuroscientists, business leaders, Silicon Valley executives. Before we began, we all had to surrender our last ties to the outside world.
Put your devices in the basket, you know. I'm contributing my MacBook Air and my iPhone, happily.
I wasn't exactly happy to give up my phone. I usually check emails several times an hour.
So let's take a few minutes and just settle into an erect and dignified posture.
The retreat lasted 3 days, and most of that time was spent just sitting there, silently meditating, with occasional guidance from Kabat-Zinn.
There's no place to go. There's nothing to do. We're just asking you to sit and know that you're sitting.
Knowing that you're sitting may sound simple. Turns out it's not. The mind constantly wanders.
The mind has a life of its own. It goes here and there.
To not get lost in thought, Kabat-Zinn recommended focusing on the sensation of breathing in and out.
Can we actually ride with full awareness on the waves of the breath at the belly, at the nostrils, in the chest, and then simply rest here in awareness?
Resting in awareness is one of those phrases used a lot by people who practice mindfulness. But when I tried to do it, it wasn't restful, and I worried I wasn't doing it right. I kept thinking about work.
I miss my cell phone.
You're not alone.
Having a little withdrawal, I will say.
Kabat-Zinn, who's written 10 books on mindfulness and led nearly 100 retreats, describes meditation as a mental workout.
The mind wanders away from the breath, and then you gently and non-judgmentally just bring it back.
So it's okay that the mind drifts away, but you just bring it back?
It's the nature of the mind to drift away. The mind is like the Pacific Ocean. It waves. And mindfulness has been shown to drop underneath the waves. If you drop underneath the agitation in the mind into your breath, deep enough, calmness, gentle undulations.
After hours of meditating and 30-minute sessions, it does get easier. Those waves of thought Kabat-Zinn described, they're still there, but you get less distracted by them. At breakfast, we spent time relearning some of the very basic things in life, including how to eat food. Eating a meal in complete silence is a little awkward, but without conversation as a distraction, you taste more and eat less. This is something called walking meditation. The goal is to learn to be aware of each and every movement and feeling. I know it seems ridiculous, but it does change the way you experience walking.
The Zen people from ancient China, when you're walking, just walk. Turns out to be the hardest thing.
That's an ancient saying.
When you're walking, just walk. When you're eating, just eat. Not from the TV, not with the newspaper. Turns out that's huge.
Congressman Tim Ryan, an Ohio Democrat, says mindfulness might look a lot like nothing, but he really believes it can change America for the better. He attended his first meditation retreat in 2008, just days after winning a grueling re-election campaign. But being mindful at a retreat is one thing. We wondered if back in Washington, Congressman Ryan ever worries about how all this looks.
Well, you know, I can see myself in high school going, whoa, stay away from those guys.
So how do you use it here on Capitol Hill?
I'm on the budget committee, for example. There's a lot of conflict, and people say things that get you ramped up. I find myself, as my body clenches up when somebody says something that I know is wrong, or I want to catch them in a lie, or whatever, that just calm down. When it's your turn, you make your point. Hey, man.
You don't hear the words calm and Congress together very often, but Ryan is trying to change that. He hosts weekly meditation sessions open to members and staff of both parties.
Now shifting the attention to take in the entire body.
Have you gotten any Republican congressmen in to meditate with you yet?
No. We're working on it.
He's written a book about mindfulness and obtained $1 million of federal funding to teach it to school children in his Ohio district.
Yeah, like we're calm right now.
Yes, you are. I've seen it transform classrooms. I've seen it heal veterans. I've seen what it does to individuals who have really high chronic levels of stress and how it has helped their body heal itself. I wouldn't be willing to stick my neck out this far if I didn't think this is the thing that can really help shift the country.
To some people, though, this may sound like kind of new age gobbledygook.
There's so many different compelling studies that are showing that this is not New Age gobbledygook. This is potentially transformative of our health and well-being psychologically as well as physically. It can be useful for anxiety, depression, stress reduction.
There have been a number of studies that show mindfulness can lead to those benefits, as well as improvements in memory and attention. And at the University of Massachusetts, Judson Brewer, a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, uses mindfulness to treat addiction.
This is just the next generation of exercise. We've got the physical, exercise components down, and now it's about working out how can we actually train our minds.
Dr. Brewer is trying to understand how mindfulness can alter the functioning of the brain. He uses a cap lined with 128 electrodes.
We're going to start filling each of these 128 wells with conduction gel.
The electrodes are able to pick up signals from the posterior cingulate, part of a brain network linked to memory and emotion.
This is all just picking up electrical signal from the top of your head.
Since attending the mindfulness retreat, I'd been meditating daily and was curious to see if it had an impact on my brain.
We're going to have you start with thinking of something that was very anxiety-provoking for you.
Okay.
When I thought about something stressful, the cells in my brain's posterior cingulate immediately started firing, shown by the red lines that went off the chart on the computer screen.
Just drop into meditation.
Okay.
When I let go of those stressful thoughts and refocused on my breath, within seconds the brain cells that had been firing quieted down, shown by the blue lines on the computer.
That's really fascinating to see like that.
Dr. Brewer believes everyone can train their brains to reach that blue mindfulness zone, but he says all the technology we're surrounded by makes it difficult.
If you look at people out on the street, if you look at people at restaurants, nobody's having conversations anymore. They're sitting at dinner looking at their phone because their brain is so addicted to it.
You really think there's something in the brain that's addicted to that?
Well, it's the same reward pathways as addiction, absolutely.
I'm, on mobile devices all day long, and I feel like I could go through an entire day and not be present.
And what's that like?
It's exhausting.
Yeah. So all of this is leading to a societal exhaustion.
The irony is many of the people responsible for creating the gadgets that distract us are themselves practicing mindfulness. More than 2,000 people from companies like Google, Facebook, and Instagram showed up earlier this year in San Francisco for a mindfulness conference called Wisdom 2.0.
Please welcome our guests.
Karen May is a Google vice president, and that's Chade Main-Tun, a former engineer who's become kind of a mindfulness guru. As could only happen at a place like Google, his actual title is Jolly Good Fellow.
Which nobody can deny.
So what does a Jolly Good Fellow do?
My job description is to enlighten minds, open hearts, and create world peace.
That's your job description?
That's my job description.
I've heard that at some meetings at Google, you actually start out with moments of silence.
We do.
How long do you sit there quietly for?
It's literally a minute or two of noticing your breathing, calming yourself down, being present, and then you're able to go into the meeting, the business at hand, with a little bit more focus.
Does it make people more productive?
Yes, it does. When the mind is unagitated, when the mind is calm, that mind is most conducive to creative problem solving.
To innovate.
Correct. And one of the powers of mindfulness is the ability to get to that frame of mind on demand.
So, along with their free health clubs and other company perks, Google now offers their 52,000 employees free lessons in mindfulness.
In the middle of stress, when everything's falling apart, you can take one breath.
I can imagine some people rolling their eyes and saying, oh, come on, of course, Google, you guys have tons of money, and there's massage therapists walking around and all sorts of nice things for employees, but it just doesn't seem practical.
The advantage of this is it actually doesn't cost anything and it doesn't take much time.
And you believe it really works?
I absolutely believe it works.
After nearly 4 decades of teaching mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn is happy to see it hitting the mainstream. But if you're starting to think mindfulness is something you should start practicing, he says you may be missing the point.
It's not a big should. It's not like, oh, I got to now one more thing that I have to put in my life. Now I have to be mindful,
And if it becomes that one more thing they got to do after they take the yoga class.
Just don't do it. Don't do it. It's not a doing at all. In fact, it's a being, and being doesn't take any time.
Okay, we're going to take a few minutes of quiet time and then we'll have the opportunity to talk about this film. So what I'd like to invite you to do now is to put aside whatever it is you're doing, taking notes, eating food, and to begin to find a seat that is comfortable. A seat that, represents balance, a seat that represents dignity, sitting upright, erect, feet flat on the floor. And as we begin to do this, if you feel like that your seat isn't quite right for you, then feel free to move around and find that posture, that seat that works for you. The idea is when meditating in our posture, whether we're on a pillow or whether we're on a chair, is to find a posture that provides steadiness, stability, and stillness. So that's kind of the goal with whatever posture we have. So with that in mind, what I will do is I will ring the bell once at the beginning and 3 times at the end. And there'll be a little bit of guidance between the bells. Now, as far as the eyes go, if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you like to keep your eyes open, then I suggest that you look down in front of you with a relaxed gaze. And the idea is to minimize distractions. Okay. Taking this opportunity to arrive in this place, at this time, in this moment. to spend some time with ourselves in the company of others. Aware of our surroundings, noticing sounds. Some far, some near. Aware of the body, noticing points of contact with the body, with the chair, the back, the buttocks, the bottom of the legs, perhaps the arms, feet flat on the floor. Noticing any sensation, perhaps areas of discomfort or tension. Simply acknowledging what is there. Perhaps noticing the sensation of the bottom of the hands on the thighs or cupped. The sensation of the bottoms of the feet on the floor. Simply opening to whatever is there. Sounds, sensations in the body. And then bringing the attention to the breath. Noticing the in-breath and the out-breath. The in-breath and the out-breath. Noticing the full length of the breath coming in and the full length of the breath going out. Noticing the easy, steady rhythm of the breath. Through no effort of our own, we breathe. Perhaps noticing on the in-breath how the breath fills the upper body, starting with the chest and the area of the diaphragm, and then the stomach and abdomen. And how on the out-breath, the upper body empties, starting with the abdomen, the stomach, the diaphragm, and the chest. So noticing the filling and the emptying of the body with the breath. The felt experience of the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. Not ignoring sounds or sensations in the body or anything else that comes into our awareness, but simply paying attention to the breath. Knowing that if the mind wanders, and it will, we can always come back to the breath. The breath is always present, always now. Any thoughts or reflections, either on the meditation or on the wonderful video that we saw?
I think for me, I know that I let myself get consumed by my technology. Anyone that knows me very well knows that I am always connected. And I've been consciously trying, even before starting today, to learn to breathe better. And I'm trying to calm down or whatever. So watching the video, I think, just kind of brings it back home of it's just being aware of what you're doing and what you're not doing. Trying to be more conscious. I'm trying to be more conscious of the things that I want to be important in my life versus the things I feel like I have to constantly do.
Thank you. It was difficult for me to concentrate because I was thinking about what I'm going to be doing next out of my life.
I thought it was really interesting because I began reading this book called The Untethered Soul, A Journey Beyond Oneself. And I'm only through the first part, and I believe it's 3 or 4 parts. And a lot of what they were saying in his book, I could relate to being this idea of mindfulness. Because it talked about that little voice we have in our head, that it's ourselves, but it's constantly pulling us in all these directions. And that we have to learn how to be aware that it's there, but control ourselves and our presence and what we need to be doing.
Thank you.
I was thinking perhaps the times that I'm not being mindful is when I'm engaged in a habit. So I'm going to start thinking about habit and mindfulness, how they're related.
Yeah. Other thoughts, reflections? Yes, please.
Is that addiction that he talked about, I wonder if there's an addiction to just being distracted and just refusing to be in the now? I don't know. I'm a computer guy by trade, and I refuse to have a smartphone because I don't want to be that connected to everything else. But I know people that are addicted to that distraction. I wonder if it's just they don't want to be in the now. I don't think it's so bad, but I don't know.
I see somebody nodding their head.
It's I have a hard time not responding. I have a hard time putting my phone in my pocket now. You know, I'm very mindful of if my husband and I go to dinner to not take my phone out, or if we're eating dinner at home as a family. So I'm very mindful in those instances to not be connected to my technology. But any other time, I have a hard time. I'm learning. I think I've even been practicing kind of the breathing technique. I have a hard time shutting my mind down at night to go to bed because there's so many other things there. And the breathing in for 4 seconds and holding it for 7 and releasing for 8. I'm trying to do those things to help myself be more mindful. But yeah, I'm addicted, kind of.
Yeah. I'm so addicted. I have to put my phone in the back seat when I'm driving, or I will respond when I'm driving. So it has to. I have to purposely put it in the back seat so that I do not pick it up and look at it while I'm driving.
I suspect there's far more of us identifying with you than judging you right now. Yeah, that's pretty. That sounds like me. Yeah. Well, there's a recent study that I came across that looked at cell phones, and it looked at it from the perspective of addiction. And what they found is that, and I don't know the actual particulars of the study, but they found that those that had the habit of using cell phones went through withdrawals very similar to those that have addiction to alcohol and other drugs. And as was pointed out, it's the same neural pathways. One of the interesting things in that video was where he was sitting and he had the thing on, and then he remembered those anxious moments, and then it showed up red. And they talked about how the activity was in the posterior ungulate. And this is significant because the posterior ungulate is on the posterior, and it's more closely located and related to the primal part of the brain, which tends to be more instinctual, reactive, and critical to our very survival. And it's also tied to the activating system. We have two basically neurological chemical systems within us. One is an activating system, and one is a calming system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And what happens is they occur in not only different parts of the brain, but they elicit different kinds of chemicals. And so ideally what we do is you strike a balance between the two, you know. But what happens when we're anxious or afraid or angry, which may be totally appropriate to the situation, certainly in terms of our survival, it activates that part of the brain. But when he chose to breathe, when he chose to let go of that, and he chose to put the attention to the breath, and it isn't so much as he made that go away, he just shifted his attention from here to here. And when he shifted it to the breath, what that did is it kicked in the parasympathetic nervous system, and the activity is in the area of the prefrontal cortex. Okay, and this is where the most advanced part of the brain is. So we can, through the breath, shift the neurological functioning of our bodies. And it's interesting that the people from Google said that often at the beginning of their meetings they do it just for 1 or 2 minutes. And so just being aware of the breath is allow us to make that shift. Other thoughts?
So what do you suggest at night before you go to bed? And you go to bed, you don't fall asleep because your brain is all over making plans for the following day.
Well, I wouldn't suggest to you what I think that you ought to do. What I would say is that there are means available to us that we can use. And so we know that being aware of our breath, something as simple as counting our breath, can really help us to calm down. It can really help us to steady our mind. What happens with mindfulness is we're paying attention, okay, to the present moment, okay, and we're paying attention to what we're doing without ignoring what else is going on. And to be able to pay attention without being distracted is a very difficult thing to do. We have to develop this stability of the mind. We have to develop some mindfulness muscle. And so if I can, even for a brief period, just become present and just pay attention to my breath, then that other stuff will, at least for a period, drop away. And so counting the breath is one way to do that. Just paying attention to the breath. And of course, not beating ourselves up when we get distracted and that kind of thing. It's so easy. Oh, there again, I screwed up again, I screwed up again. Oh, I'm not getting this right. I'll never get it right. It's a waste of time. That's it. I've had it with mindfulness. Okay. The success in mindfulness is not measured by how long you're able to pay attention. It's about the decision to, well, it comes with the recognition that I am mindless and that I choose to become mindful again. That's where the success is, recognizing my mindlessness and choosing to be mindful. That's success. And so each time I recognize my mindlessness and then choose to become mindful, I'm developing that mindfulness muscle. I'm developing that discipline. And as a consequence, two things happen. One, I can pay attention for longer periods of time, and two, I get better at recognizing my mindlessness. But it begins with the decision to do something about it, which is not really doing, it's about being, as John Kabat-Zinn put out. You had a comment or a question, Todd?
I was just going to respond to after you.
Oh, please, go ahead.
George's suggestion, I think, is great. Another thing is, and it kind of relates to what Clay said about habits. You know, part of being present is, if going to bed and you're feeling anxious and you've got this long checklist of things running through your mind, is to sit with those things. And to sit with those things means sort of identifying what's happening in your present moment. So if you're worried or you're anxious, to label those things. And part of it is to sort of, I mean, part of it's recognizing that this is a habit, I do this every night. And noticing how it affects your emotion or your physical being, you know, if you feel tense or anxious or your stomach's in knots. And not saying it's good, bad, or otherwise, just labeling it. And I think the research shows, the sort of indications in people's experience with that over time, is that you become less sensitive to that habit, right? You become less obsessed with the checklist that's running through your mind. and the impact that it has on you lessens as you pay more attention to it. It seems counterintuitive, but it's important just to label it and not say, oh, this is bad, I shouldn't be worrying. Just, I'm anxious, I'm worried. I don't know, that fits with anything.
Mm-hmm. I would even simplify it even a bit further, and I think there's great value in that. I think we may be saying the same thing too, as it's not so much about trying to change things, it's about noticing things, and it's the noticing, it's the being present with things that allows the change to occur. What we know from the research is that what happens is people that do mindfulness meditation on a consistent basis, even for short periods, what happens is they develop a self-regulation. They're more at peace with their thoughts, they have more emotional stability. And so I'll give you two examples. There's a lot of research that looks at rumination. That's where we think, worry, worry, plan, plan, plan. We know from a recent Harvard study that we're thinking at least 47% of the time. Just thinking. We're totally not in the present, okay? And we notice people with addictions and other kinds of illnesses do a lot of rumination. And another thing that is very common is people react very strongly, emotionally, they stay hurt for long periods of time, develop resentments, develop periods of reactivity. We know that with mindfulness that what happens is the rumination goes away. We know that people are less reactive, they're emotionally stable. They develop what's called emotional resilience. And the research is so strong in that we even know where it happens in the brain. We even know what neural pathways develop. And this is the exciting thing, is we can actually change the brain. We can change the way that we're inclined to act. It's not just a matter of psychology. It's not just a matter of some kind of, changing our patterns of behavior, and all of that is powerful and necessary. But through mindfulness and mindfulness type practices, we can actually change the brain. So let's take, for example, emotional resilience. We know that emotional resilience tends to be located, or rather lack of emotional resilience seems to be related somewhere in the right prefrontal cortex area. Okay, and we know through mindfulness practices what happens is it starts to move over to the left prefrontal cortex. Okay, it's also the part of the brain that is associated with positive emotions. So what's happening is the location of the brain changes. So our inclination towards lack of emotional resilience, which would be our first reaction, now moves over to having emotional resilience. And we can actually tell through MRI studies that the brain, the location, and the activity of the brain changes. So in a sense, what we have is a new nature, a new inclination. And this is really quite remarkable. And so the research is beginning to show more and more of that. And on a personal note, I remember when I took my 8-week MBSR course, that within weeks, I began to notice that I was much less reactive in my relationship with my wife. I didn't flare up as often, and over time it was rare for me to flare up, and it was rare for me to get really, really angry. And that was something I was inclined to do. And I found that when I got hurt, I would bounce back more quickly. And I know when my wife started meditating, in addition to what she does as part of her faith tradition with her devotional practices, that there was a real difference in our marriage. And I found that even with conflict, even when it got heated and we were hurt, that it didn't hurt as bad, and more importantly, we bounced back real quickly. We were a lot more forgiving and a lot more accepting. And I could go on and on about the different qualities of mindfulness and stuff like that, but there's tons and tons of research out there that shows that these kinds of qualities I talked about really happen. And I'll give you one study that just really blows me away. There was a study done at George Mason University a couple years with intro to psych students. And all variables were constant except one. And the means of assessment were 6 quizzes and 1 final exam. The only difference between the control group and the experimental group is the experimental group did 5 minutes of silent mindfulness meditation at the beginning of class. The only difference. What they found is the group that did the mindfulness meditation did statistically significantly better in all 6 quizzes and the final exam. And the only difference was 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation. So a little bit done on a consistent basis can go a long way. So if I took a couple minutes in the evening before I went to bed, I took a couple minutes in the morning, if I did it before I started a major event, it's just that periodically saying, I choose to be mindful, I'm aware of the breath, I bring the parasympathetic nervous system into play, okay, I'm operating out of the prefrontal cortex, I'm operating out of that part of the brain which is associated with positive emotions, positive outlook, emotional resilience. And so we can, as was said, very quickly call that up. I choose to be mindful, I choose to be aware of my breath. But it's like anything, we have to kickstart that thing. You know, we have to do that. And that's the beauty of a group. And that's one of the reasons that we're offering what we're offering through the center. By coming to this on a weekly basis, we're reminded. By doing the mindfulness skills laboratory that we're doing, where people can drop any time and do mindful eating, mindful walking, sitting meditation. We do mindful listening. We're even looking at we've looked at mindful leadership, but that really helps us to sustain that, to remind us. So that's kind of like what the idea was behind in putting this together. What a beautiful segue. I have a handout for you. And thank you. That's, you know, it's almost as if you and I had planned this. Would you pass those around? This is called Here's How Zen Meditation Changed Steve Jobs' Life and Sparked a Design Revolution. Well, Steve Jobs practiced Zen Buddhism. He did meditation. When he was a young man, about 17, 18, he went off to India to study Hinduism and Buddhism, and he came back when he was 19, and he really shocked his parents when he told them that he wanted to go deep into Zen Buddhism, and he did, and there was a lot going on in San Francisco at that time. But there's a quote in here that I'd like to read to you. There's a lot to this article, so please take a look at it. And one of the reasons I asked you for your email addresses or your departments, what we're going to do is I'm going to send you a link to the video that we showed. It's easy enough to find your own, but I'll send that to you, and I'll send you the link for this one. And I have another article that I'm going to send you a link to as well. Okay? So for those of you that might have arrived a few minutes late, I'll be sure to get that video to you. But about halfway into the article, I believe it's on the second page, Steve Jobs was in an interview with his biographer, said the following, and this gets to the issue of creativity. If you just sit and observe, you will see how restless your mind is. If you try to calm it, it only makes things worse. But over time it does calm, and when it does, there's room to hear more subtle things. That's when your intuition starts to blossom and you start to see things more clearly and be in the present more. Your mind just slows down and you see a tremendous expanse in the moment. You see so much more than you could before. It's a discipline. You have to practice it. So recall Jon Kabat-Zinn talking about all of these waves of the ocean, but getting down below that. And you capture the undulations, the subtleties. And that's where that creativity is. That's where that inspiration is. But if you can't see that in the din, or can't hear that in the din of all that noise and all that thinking. And then he goes on to point out that Jon Kabat-Zinn, the key to his success, as represented in his saying that he says that his goal wasn't to give people what they wanted. It was to give them what they didn't know they needed. It wasn't to give them what they wanted, but to give them what they didn't know they needed. And the biographer goes on to point out that what happened through his meditation is that Steve Jobs developed a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, and he had the ability to really understand people from the inside out. And I think the evidence is or the proof of that is the products that they've designed. And it's going to be really interesting to see now that he's no longer around whether or not they'll still be able to have that creative impulse. And by the way, the movie Jobs is really quite interesting. It really does capture that creative genius. It also points out what a jerk he was. He was really a horrible person. But to his credit, he made amends. He did his best to make amends. So any thoughts on this or the film or anything else? We have just a few minutes left officially. Yes?
I'm just going to add a little bit to this idea of creativity and mindfulness. I've recently become aware of this neuroscientist named Jill Bolt Taylor, who in her 30s experienced a massive brain hemorrhage in the left hemisphere. And she was aware enough to know that she was having a stroke. And she was fascinated with the whole process because she was a brain scientist. And so she was able to document her experience. It took her 10 years to regain enough of her left hemisphere to write and to speak. But one of the things that she talked about is how euphoric she felt during the whole stroke. The right hemisphere started to dominate because the left hemisphere was in danger. And she felt joy, and she felt creative, and she felt euphoric is the word that she used. Wow. And every once in a while, her left hemisphere would kick in and say, you're in danger, you're in danger. But the left, she talks about how the left hemisphere is what gives us that constant chatter in our head. Yeah. And so if you can be more creative, if you can listen to music, if you can doodle, if you can paint or draw, and you start enforcing and strengthening the right hemisphere, it helps to quiet the left hemisphere.
I read the same book, and she also states that she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to that chaos.
That she was so euphoric in her right hemisphere. That,
On a personal note, my son took a job at Google in September, and everything you think about it, it's true. You know, gyms, personal trainers, restaurants, meals. It's no wonder that year after year it's voted the place to work. Who wouldn't want to work in an environment like that? Also, my first extended meditation retreat was with John Kabat-Zinn and Saki Sanarelli, who was his first student and first teacher, and is now the current director of the Center for Mindfulness. And I was so moved by that it inspired me to go on and become an MBSR teacher. This is the first of a series in mindfulness. We hope that you join us for the others. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, concerns, please let myself or Todd or somebody at the center know. We are here to serve you.